Welcome to Freight Week STL 2026. Special thanks to our sponsors for their generous support of this annual event. In this session, we will deliver insights into global trade dynamics and their implications for North America freight networks. From economic trends and geopolitical factors to shifting trade flows, we'll examine what's shaping demand across modes and explore the role of foreign trade zones. Joining us today is Panos Kouvelis, Emerson Distinguished Professor of Supply Chain Operations and Technology at the Olin Business School at Washington University in St. Louis and Director of the Boeing Center for Supply Chain Innovation. Welcome, Panos. Let's start by sharing a little bit about your background.
Mary, thank you very much for the opportunity. I have been a professor at Western University in St. Louis for 30 years or so, and also the director of the Boeing Center for Supply Chain Innovation, which is a research center we have at the Olin Business School at Western University. I have enjoyed the partnership with St. Louis Regional FreightWays, and it's my honor to have an opportunity to be part of Freight Week of 2026.
Okay, tariffs and trade rules seem to be shifting even more frequently than they have in the past. From an operations and a supply chain management perspective, what do companies struggle with most when policies like this are in flux?
Well, Mary, tariff volatility is a tremendous challenge for companies, especially the way that they do their planning. It's very hard to do reliable planning either on sourcing or planning inventories or pricing or how you allocate your capital when tariffs and trade policies change so fast. All of these sourcing and shipping uncertainties finally translate in supply lead time uncertainties, which affect the way you deliver to your customers in the markets, are going to increase your cost and definitely drive up your inventories, which of course creates a challenge for cash flow management. The emphasis of tariff volatility, sometimes people think is another customs management problem, but it is not. Is a planning problem of the supply chain and the overall enterprise. In order to have success in this new environment, you need to plan carefully for multiple scenarios. You need to exercise operational flexibility in switching between different options you have created on the sourcing, the shipping, and so on. So therefore, now the exercise and the strengths of the companies are on sales and operations planning, on risk management, and of course, very smart capital allocation.
Help us to better understand the differences between foreign trade zones and bonded warehouses and what types of companies are taking advantage of them.
Mary, these are two tools that companies found very useful the last 10 years, and sometimes it's not very well understood. So I think it's a great opportunity to give you a little more of insights. With respect to bonded warehouses, you can think about warehouses where you can do storage, but you can defer the duties until the goods are shipped to the market. So effectively, the bonded warehouses are very good for cash flow management and deferral of duties. And you see that in environments or companies that they import a lot, like retailers and consumer packaged good companies are very frequent examples of bonded warehouse users. The foreign trade zones is a much more powerful tool. A trade zone designated legally as serving outside of the U.S. territory. So goods that you bring there, not only you store them, but you have the opportunity to further process them without paying any duties until you decide what you're going to do with them. So the further processing, which can involve some manufacturing, some assembly, some testing, some relabeling, and so on, gives you tremendous optionality. So you can see the environment and then decide, are you going to send them to the American market or are you going to export without actually paying duties to some other market? And these are tremendous advantages. And actually, for foreign trade zones, we have something that seems a little of an oxymoron in a certain way. We have the inverted tariff advantage. Sometimes you import components that have very high duties, and then you bring them in and you work on them. You reconfigure them into a finished good, which might have lower duties. Therefore, you can take advantage of this processing capability, something that you don't have with respect to bonded warehouses. This inverted tariff advantage is a big one, and we see it being used in the automotive industry, in electronics, in aerospace, in pharmaceuticals, in chemicals, and for smaller to medium-sized companies, third-party logistics running some of these trade zones are offering the opportunity to also take advantage of it. It is great that in the bi-state region, we do have some established foreign trade zones. According to my research, the foreign trade zone 102 is serving the St. Louis City and County, and the foreign trade zone 31 is southwest Illinois. Also in Missouri, we have two other trade zones, one in Kansas City and the other one in Springfield. These assets are great for companies in this region, and heavy users, as far as I know, have been Bayer, the chemical and agribusiness company in our region, and General Motors, their Wentzville facility is also heavily using these foreign trade zones. The foreign trade zones is a great asset for the region, making a very footprints and resilience in the current environment when they combine foreign trade zones with the tremendous flexibility of the multimodal logistics network that our region offers.
Okay, building on that, the St. Louis region also has a strong multimodal logistics network supporting its foreign trade zones. How does that combination position the region for companies navigating tariffs and trade complexity?
Mary, as I emphasized, in this new environment is everything about optionality you have created and the flexibility to exercise it. So the foreign trade zones that we discussed before is a great asset for our region when it's also combined with some of the other great assets that our region has, like the multimodal logistics network access, the river access, the rail connectivity, the vast interstate highways, the air cargo capabilities, and at the same time, reasonable cost real estate and well-trained and available labor pool are options that the company can use in an environment of trade uncertainty. They need to come closer to the markets. They need to create some new facilities for some extra processing. At the same time, they should have different options that they can access the market beyond the traditional ocean logistics. We are in an environment where companies are facing these ocean freight bottlenecks, and they realize they need to create regional networks that will bring them much closer to the markets, and use different ways to access those markets through rivers, through rail, and air. And I believe our region, in combination of the foreign trade zones that offer some new processing capabilities together with the amazing capabilities on the multimodal logistics side, create the optionality and the flexibility that companies are looking in this high volatility tariff environment.
Okay, how do all the changing trade rules or tariffs influence decisions around sourcing, production planning, and even where facilities may be located?
Mary, as I emphasized, the new environment is an environment of planning challenges. On the sourcing side, things have changed quite a lot. We used to think about it, let's find the low-cost suppliers, typically very far away, and try to allocate everything to one or two suppliers. Now we're living in an environment where it's important to have multiple suppliers, many of them closer to our market, and the ability through multi-sourcing to quickly change as needed and using the portfolio of suppliers. On the production plan, again, it was all about efficiency and very low cost. In many cases, that implied very long supply chains from sourcing from countries very far away. Now we realize that we should get into a lean mode where we're producing more frequently, smaller batches, very close to our markets, and taking advantage of the logistics networks we have to deliver really fast and very reliably. And with respect to facility location, again, we realized that these offshore locations are very far away with very long supply chains, might not be serving us very well. So it's time for us to start thinking about having regional networks closer to the markets, multiple facilities. So that is where the presence of foreign trade zones gives us opportunities to create new processing facilities very close to the markets, and in combination with the flexibility of a logistic network to better serve our markets. In this new environment, it's very clear we need robustness with respect to multiple scenarios that can happen, and create that robustness through the sourcing and the facility network footprint.
Okay, we hear a lot about reshoring and nearshoring. From your perspective, how much of that is driven by tariffs versus other factors? And what makes an inland manufacturing hub like the St. Louis region competitive in that conversation?
Mary, the near-shoring, reshoring discussion has started, I would say, the last 20 years. It has been there and intensified the last 10 years. Definitely, tariffs are an accelerator of this type of a discussion, but I wouldn't call it the main engine behind the discussion. The main factors that drive considerations of reshoring and nearshoring are associated with rising overseas labor costs, having very long supply chains that create all kinds of transportation risks. In an environment of geopolitical risk, many disruptions of these long supply chains can be heavily consequential for companies. And the new environment, customers expect faster service and better and reliable service, and of course, a very high quality. In this new environment, these kind of regional networks closer to the market become extremely important, and that's what I believe the discussion of our region and the St. Louis area is nicely fitting the trend of reshoring or nearshoring, because of the presence not only of the real estate and the labor and the foreign trade zones that offer new processing capabilities, but at the same time combined with the tremendous flexibility of the logistics network that will allow companies to exercise the needed optionality in this new, highly uncertain in terms of trade policies and tariffs environment. Um, it could be for some people, St. Louis is not a flashy location, but definitely is an operationally sharp, extremely effective, cost competitive location for building the resilience that is needed in this new environment.
Okay, Panos, final question. The first half of 2026 has been marked by intensified geopolitical risk and dramatic ripple effects stemming from the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. What are some practical steps that companies can make today to make their supply chains more resilient during such turbulent times?
Mary, every day these days, we're waking up hearing the news about what happens in the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz. And companies are worried about disruptions that are going to happen as a result of the constraints on the energy side, petrochemicals, and shipping alternatives that they need now to explore. In this environment, it's very important to, first of all, understand where the risks are and have visibility of the potential disruptions, and then be prepared to deal with multiple scenarios of potential disruptions that may happen. So, from a risk management perspective, as we always say, first you need to assess your risks. You need to map your exposure with respect to your products, to your components, to your suppliers, to your shipping lanes, and how they will be affected by the constraints from the energy side or the petrochemicals and the carriers. And that should be really aware and continuously refreshed in order to understand where those risks are. Then we talked about it. The most important way that you can hedge these type of risks is by exercising operational flexibility through the optionality that you have already built. The alternatives in the supplier network, the alternatives in the facility network, the opportunity to examine multiple routes, transportation alternatives, use different carriers, and so on. That is what is going to allow you to survive through the current environment. Definitely, in the new environment, you need to increase the cadence of the decisions. Frequently revisit plans and decisions that you make. You need to be ready to establish war rooms. You need to have within your supply chain these kind of control tower structures, so you can easily coordinate what is needed with your suppliers and your distributors and your retailers downstream. The lean inventories, of course, this is the way to operate day to day, but in certain cases, you need to have strategic inventories of crucial components or a material that will be affected by this type of disruptions, and you got to make the necessary investments. And it's very important to realize, especially in supply chains, you have other partners. You have suppliers, you have distributors, you have customers, and you got to strengthen the relationships. And at the same time, each partner of the supply chain need to make commitments in different scenarios. What are they going to do for the rest of the supply chain? And these commitments for the supplier side, expressed in contracts, and for the customer side, also expressed in appropriate contracts, have to be taken into consideration. The companies that are going to do really well in this environment are not the companies that have a lot of inventories. These are the companies that have very clear priorities, have carefully thought about the commitments they make to the supply chain, and they are ready for cross-functional response and coordinated responses with the rest of the partners in the supply chain.
Okay, Panos, a sincere thank you for joining us. We appreciate your perspective on this timely topic. It's clear that while much is out of our control when it comes to global trade dynamics, there are steps companies can take to mitigate risk, and it's great to hear that the St. Louis region may offer solutions worth considering in the midst of various global supply chain disruptions. Special thanks to our sponsors. Their support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver the great content that is a hallmark of this annual conference. Presenting sponsors include Ameren, the Illinois Railroad Association, and GFT Infrastructure. Supporting sponsors include HNTB, Steadfast City, and the Hauser Group.